In the last episode, I shared my first scouting trip of the season, which started with a bang in Las Vegas, Nevada, as I checked out Texas freshman Trey Johnson. Since then, it's been a whirlwind. I've been all over the map. After Vegas, I made a quick pit stop in Provo, Utah to see Yegor Demon at BYU, swung through Atlanta for the Champions Classic, where I got an up-close look at top-rated Cooper Flagg from Duke, headed down to Auburn to scout Janai Broome, and wrapped things up back in Atlanta with Georgia versus Georgia Tech to evaluate Asa Newell. In just the first 2 weeks of the college season, I scouted 6 of my top 14 projected lottery picks for the 2025 NBA Draft, and plenty of other intriguing prospects. It's been a wild, rewarding ride so far, but the scouting trail didn't stop there. So what next? Well, my biggest trip of the year, an 11-day adventure to the Bahamas, where I saw 18 games, countless prospects, and soaked in a lot more than just the sun. Today, I'll take you behind the scenes of that trip, what I saw, what I learned, and some of the stories that stuck with me along the way. I'm Matt Babcock, and this is the Matt Babcock Show. After an aggressive first 2 weeks, I was home for a few days to hang with my wife and kids, catch my breath, and pack a bag for an 11-day trip to the Bahamas. I live in Denver, Colorado, and it was mid-November. My summer clothes were already in the basement closet for the season. So after digging out some polos and shorts, I was ready to trade the cold Rocky Mountain air for the tropical breeze in 18 basketball games in 11 days. The next thing I knew, my alarm was going off for a 3 a.m. pickup at my house. A car was waiting to take me to the airport for a 5 a.m. flight to Houston, where I'd connect to Nassau. Man, that was early. But after a long travel day and catching plenty of sleep on those 2 flights, I finally cracked my eyes open as we descended. I glanced out the plane window and saw stunning blue Bahamian water. It looked like a postcard. I had made it to paradise. After landing, it didn't take long to feel the island vibe. The warmth hit me the second I stepped off the plane, and the palm trees lining the airport made it clear I was far from Denver. I grabbed my bag, navigated customs, and hopped in a cab to my hotel. Nassau was buzzing with energy, and the basketball world had landed on this slice of paradise. Fans and alumni from every school proudly wore their team's colors. With so many college tournaments and games that week, it felt like everyone had come to support their team and enjoy a unique Thanksgiving celebration. Once I got to the Baha Mar Resort, I checked in, dropped my bags in the room, and took a moment to soak it all in. The ocean breeze, the sound of the waves crashing, and the anticipation of what was ahead. This wasn't just another scouting trip. I was excited to be there. Scouting trips often take me to small, out-of-the-way college towns. I'll fly cross-country and drive hours to catch a single game, and more often than not, I end up alone in a quiet hotel room afterward. It can sometimes be isolating, but it's part of the job. This trip to the Bahamas, though, was different. My dad, who works for the Milwaukee Bucks, was assigned to scout there too, and my mom came along for the ride. So, with no games scheduled until the next day, we made the most of it with an incredible dinner at the Ocean Club, a Four Seasons hotel and one of my all-time favorites. You might recognize it from the James Bond movie, Casino Royale. The hotel's restaurant, Dune, was right off the beach, with spectacular ocean views. And we indulged. Fresh fish, lobster, you name it. For that one evening, it did feel like a vacation. However, when the sun rose the next morning, it was time to get back to business. The work was about to begin. So my dad and I headed over to the Baha Mar Convention Center, which is attached to the resort. It was essentially a big ballroom converted into a basketball venue. For this event, I had a media credential and my dad had a scouting credential, but there weren't any reserved seats. It was open seating, first come, first serve. That wasn't a problem since I typically get to games as early as possible. Plus, in a venue that small, there wasn't a bad seat in the house. When we stepped into the convention center, the energy was electric. 4 big-time programs, Baylor, St. John's, Tennessee, and Virginia. There was an incredible buzz with a packed gym and a mix of NBA scouts and basketball fans. The stakes felt high, even for early season games. This wasn't just basketball. It was a proving ground, an early season test for the teams, and the perfect setting for me to evaluate who has what it takes to play at the next level. The tournament started with a bang, Baylor vs. St. John's and a double overtime thriller. The energy in the gym was unreal. Every possession felt like it mattered, even in November. My focus was on Baylor's VJ Edgecombe, one of the top prospects on my big board. Early on, he was quiet, often relegated to the corner while other players dominated the ball. Still, he found ways to impress with his poise and effort. The game reached its climax when Jeremy Roach buried a buzzer-beating three to secure the win for Baylor, and the place erupted. It was nuts. After that first game, my dad handed me his notebook, a big clunky plastic thing he uses for his scouting notes, and asked me to hold on to it. He wanted to go back to the locker room to say hello to his good friend, Rick Barnes, the head coach of Tennessee, before their game against Virginia. Since there weren't any reserved seats, one of us needed to stay behind to hold our spots. No problem. I set his notebook on the seat next to me and got comfortable, waiting for the next game to start. Not long after, a lady asked to squeeze by to get another seat in our row. As she passed, she accidentally knocked the notebook off the seat and under the bleachers. I looked down and could see it lying there, but couldn't quite reach it. And since I didn't want to lose our seats, I decided to wait for my dad to get back to share the bad news. When he returned, I told him what had happened. He shook his head and stormed off, clearly annoyed. I figured he was going to find someone to help, so I didn't think much of it and turned my attention back to the warm-ups. A few minutes later, I heard a muffled voice. "Matt." Sort of confused, I looked around, and then to my disbelief, there he was, under the bleachers. My dad had army crawled under the bleachers to rescue his precious notebook. And keep in mind, we were sitting at center court, so he crawled a long way. A few minutes later, he popped back up, and as he walked back to our seats, he triumphantly held the notebook in there like a trophy. I couldn't help myself. I burst out laughing. Honestly, I don't think I've ever laughed that hard at a game before. It was hilarious. Okay, so with my dad's notebook back safely in his hands, we settled in for the next game, Tennessee versus Virginia. The gym was packed, the energy was electric, and it was time to lock back in. Tennessee's Chaz Lanier wasted no time making his mark. And he didn't just deliver, he put on a show that day and throughout the tournament as Tennessee took home the championship. By the end of the tournament, Lanier had climbed all the way to number 36 on my big board, after starting off not being on it at all. So with the Baha Mar Hoops Championship now wrapped up, it was time to shift gears. I packed up and headed down the road to the Atlantis Hotel for the next part of the trip, the Battle for Atlantis. This tournament promised another competitive field, with programs like Arizona, Indiana, and Gonzaga set to play. And to top it off, my wife and kids were flying in. After a few days of non-stop scouting, I was excited to see them and enjoy some family time, at least when I wasn't at the games. When my wife and I walked into the Atlantis Hotel with our kids, the first people we saw were several members of the Arizona basketball team. One of them was my guy Caleb Love, who I'd gotten to know a couple of years ago when we were both part of Damian Lillard's Formula Zero. Because my wife and I both went to Arizona, our family naturally roots for the Wildcats, and my 8-year-old son, Matthew Jr., was especially excited to meet Caleb. And a little while later, we also ran into Gonzaga's Caleb Battle and Graham Ike, two more players I'd gotten to know through Formula Zero. Watching my son's eyes light up as he meets players he looks up to is special for me. It reminds me of tagging along with my dad as a kid. Those experiences left a lasting impact on me, and I'm grateful to be able to share things like that with my son too. So as the Battle for Atlantis got underway, the energy only ramped up. And I have to say that I truly appreciate the accommodations provided by Leah Miller-Tooley and Mallory Schertz of Complete Sports Management, who run this incredible event. Not only did they organize a top-notch tournament, but they also took great care of me personally. I mean, I had the best seat in the house all week, courtside, center court. I even snuck my son down there with me a couple of times. It was big time, and the perfect vantage point to evaluate talent. Surprisingly, the team and player who made the biggest impression weren't who I expected. Freshman Jeremiah Fears and his Oklahoma Sooners stole the show with their grit and talent, winning the tournament. As a result of that exposure, I now have Fears projected as a first-round pick. So all in all, this trip was unforgettable. The intensity of the games, the high-level talent on display, the beach and island vibe, and having my family there to share the experience, it all made my week in the Bahamas truly special. And I'm thankful for it all. I'm Matt Babcock, and this is the Matt Babcock Show. Thanks for listening.